We just want to welcome everyone to our exclusive virtual education event. So today we have a very important topic that we'd like to talk about, the impact of climate change on Florida real estate. And today we have an amazing panel. I first would like to start off with Jen Kowalski, Vice President for National Accounts with American Integrity Insurance. Jennifer began her 16-year career at Bankers Insurance Group, where she managed non-standard auto programs in Florida, Texas, Louisiana, Washington, Oregon, and California. She then became the Director of National Accounts for American Strategic Insurance and served as Vice President of Sales with Velocity Risk Underwriters. The last 21 years of her career has focused on home insurance for the coastal states, working with builders, realtors, and mortgage company-owned agencies. Jen is a certified chartered property casualty underwriter, the most recognized credential in risk and insurance, and a resident of St. Pete, Florida. We also have Dr. Jennifer Languell. For more than 19 years, Dr. Jennifer Languell has championed the integration of green building principles and sustainable design with the construction industry. Today, as founder and president of Trifecta Construction Solutions, she remains an outspoken advocate and valued consultant to a wide range of industries that incorporate sustainable business practices into their daily operations. In 2011, she became the first person to receive the National Association of Home Builders Green Advocate of the Year award twice since its inception in 1997. Her work has included the creation of award-winning high-rise multifamily and single-family residential project, commercial projects, and some of the largest, most sustainable land developments in the world. She has also become a trusted consultant to governments, municipalities that are rapidly moving toward more sustainable, fiscally prudent operating and management practices. Dr. Languell serves in leadership roles with many nonprofit organizations, is a past president / vice president of the Florida Green Building Coalition, LEED accredited professional for the USGBC, a NAHB verifier and certified green professional, and a certifying agent with the Florida Green Building Coalition. She has certified over 5 million square feet of buildings and 30,000 acres of land developments from using programs such as LEED, FGBC, and Green Globes. Wow, impressive. Finally, I get to introduce Senator Jason Pizzo, who was elected to the Florida Senate in 2018, representing 15 cities in Miami-Dade County, and currently serves on 6 Senate committees, including Commerce and Tourism, Appropriations, Pandemic Preparedness and Response, and was named Chairman of Criminal Justice Committee. Senator Pizzo also served as an appointee to the Criminal Punishment Code Task Force and is currently an appointee to the Florida Commission on Access to Civil Justice. Mr. Pizzo was named Miami-Dade Democratic Party's 2020 Legislator of the Year and received last year's Defender of Home Rule Award, the highest honor given by the Florida League of Cities. Senator Jason Pizzo was born in New Jersey, graduated from NYU with a degree in journalism, later joining the family business of residential and commercial development. He later attended Columbia University, receiving a master's degree from the Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, the University of Miami School of Law. Mr. Pizzo spent nearly 5 years as assistant state attorney for the Miami-Dade State's Attorney's Office before running for elected office. Among the many important issues Senator Pizzo focuses on for his constituents, climate change is an important one. Quoting the senator directly, "Those of us in South Florida have seen the flooded streets and the rising sea levels. We need to work together and act now to curb climate change and prepare for its effects on our neighborhoods." And a special thank you to Maggie Gerson, always helping to facilitate and coordinate.
Thank you so much, Deb. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, Senator Pizzo. I do want to give a little bit of background here. We're going to talk about property values in relation to climate change and sea level rise. So in the past few years, multiple sources and studies, including Realtor.com, the New York Times, Florida Realtors Magazine, and others, have published articles citing the University of Pennsylvania study looking at coastal real estate markets here in Florida and predicting that as many as 1 million Florida homes are expected to be at risk of chronic flooding due to rising sea levels by the year 2100. Okay, so the study also compared homes in areas with more exposure to sea level rise and those less at risk. There's another Harvard study, a report from First Street Foundation, Wharton School of Business, and the consulting firm McKinsey that also noted that specific Florida markets are already seeing a slowing of home value increases and possibly even devaluation compared to the less at-risk markets. So starting with you, Senator Pizzo, given the challenges of sea level rise, what are your thoughts on the future value and desirability of Florida coastal properties?
Thank you for the question and thanks for having me here.
Senator, can you turn yourself up a little bit?
Let me try this. Does this work?
That works much better. Thank you, sir.
Okay, much better. All right. Sort of a baby step incremental change in philosophy has happened, thank goodness, over the past couple of years. When I first joined you guys a couple of years ago, I think when we were doing one of these discussions, we met with a lot of resistance because it was sort of one side of the aisle was not allowed to talk about these things, certainly not include any sort of budgetary accommodations or even philosophical accommodations as it relates to climate change and sea level rise. Man, a couple sessions later, and we're in a completely different environment. And I'm very pleased to say that we've seen a number of dollars and now effort towards the creation of a resiliency program and grant program that'll be run through the DEP, a clear delineation of dollars. And so to your question about value, the desirability of our climate topically, so to speak, and the environment around us, it should and always will be high, so long as there's obviously some investment and assurance as best as possible towards our future. When you say 2100, I would be 124 years old. So there are a group of people who actually care about the proverbial tomorrow. As too often is the case in certain sections of my district, the 15 cities that I represent, there's a whole sort of, it's not homogenous. Your buyer, your investor, so to speak, your family, your prospective buyer is not a homogenous set by any means. This is not suburban sort of middle America where people are laying roots down and hope that their kid and their grandchild, inherits the house. There are a number of different situations in parts of my district on the beach. There are people from foreign countries who buy condo units because we have title insurance, because if the government takes something, they'll get something of value, which is tough to compete against. But now that we finally have moved the needle and there's bipartisan support for really addressing things like septic to sewer conversion, high water table issues to get to public sewer, repairing and replacing public sanitary sewer, and also obviously, beach erosion to street flooding, bodes well. And it's been a remarkable sort of go slow, hurry up over the past year.
Thank you, Senator, and I'm very glad that you mentioned the septic sewer conversions. I think that's a very important point. I'm going to move on to Dr. Languell real quick. And Dr. Languell, the same question about the future value and desirability, but I also want to add to that is, are we only concerned about coastal properties as far as sea level rise and climate change?
So the quick answer to are we only concerned with the coast is no. With respect to desirability, I see the coast of Florida always being desirable. And when we look at the studies that you're referring to, they were from 2018, 2019, 2020. And right now, our market is very much different than what it was in those reports, so to speak. So we have seen a lot of exiting folks from the north move south. Florida sees on average about 1,000 people per day move in, and that really has been a ballpark rough estimate for over 20 years now. So I don't know that we're going to see people not moving to Florida, but what I do see is them looking for greater durability. And that's durability, whether it is against hurricanes or wildfires. It depends, of course, on where you are in the state. We do have issues with flooding that are not coastal. They are specific to sheet flow and rivers that rise and lack of proper stormwater drainage. So there's a combination of things, and I absolutely agree that we've made great advances from the requirements or land development codes. I think we can push those a little bit further. I know we always get resistance from industry. I have a contractor's license myself, so we don't always like being told what to do, but sometimes, especially with respect to resilience and durability, we really do need a push in the right direction, and regulation and codes really do get us there.
Thank you very much. Ms. Kowalski, I'm going to ask you the same question, but could you please turn on your video?
It was on and it switched to my two different webcams. So I've been fuddling in the background. My apologies.
All right, no worries.
Start.
Well, we got a blank screen for you. So Deb, watch out. I'm going to put you up on the screen while we let Ms. Kowalski answer the question.
Sure. And I agree with the points made here too. I think we're artificially propped up by the events of COVID and with the mass exodus down to Florida. It's funny, being a Florida insurance company, we have so many of our northern neighbors trying to hold on to those customers and approach us every day for an agency appointment. So I think right now the interest in the market is what's keeping us afloat. I think there is some general concern overall, but with the median home price continuing to go up, it's up at $314,000 right now here in Florida. And we're facing, for the first time, a new construction slowdown. So
I don't know if we lost Ms. Kowalski. All right, Dr. Languell, I'm going to hop back over to you while Ms. Kowalski rejoins us. And I'm going to move on to the next question, which is about climate-resistant building. And so I had already referenced the University of Pennsylvania study, in which it noted that buyers coming from out of state seem to be more concerned about the risks of sea level rise and climate change than our local buyers. So with regard to that, has that been your experience? And what types of issues should our audience expect to see in coming years with regard to sea level rise and climate change in Florida real estate?
So I can say that I've yet to experience a situation where someone has a potential home buyer has come to me and said, I'm worried about climate change. Please tell me what kind of house to buy. It hasn't happened yet. And when you start to think about green building or sustainable development, a lot of times people immediately go to energy. So they think energy efficiency, and a lot of times that is because there is a return on payback when it comes to energy efficiency. People don't always think about other resources like water efficiency or materials efficiency, and they don't necessarily think about durability as one of those items they should look for. We in Florida right now have about 6,300,000 or so households, about 7.3 million housing units. And if you look at those housing units, over 4 million of those are what I would classify as pre-Hurricane Andrew, meaning when Hurricane Andrew hit in the early 90s, we had a significant change in code that made our structures a lot more durable. So over half of the structures currently in the state are not what I would consider built to today's standards by any stretch of the imagination. And since the mid 90s to now, we've had many additional code increases. So we know how to make homes durable, especially if they're coastal. We know what the right thing to do is. from a durability standpoint. But I do also think that the home buyer out there that's looking at energy efficiency really globally is helping, because again, more efficient structures are using less energy, which requires or produces less greenhouse gases. So it really goes back to kind of the root cause. But as far as someone asking to buy a house that's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, I've not yet met that customer. We do see them, again, asking for efficiency, and some, again, asking for durability. I can say from where I am now, which is Babcock Ranch, which is inland, part of our mission was to really create a durable community. So we are not coastal, and we're specifically not coastal because we have lower wind speeds inland a bit. We have the ability to get rid of stormwater very quickly and channel it through our natural flowways. So there is some strategy with some of the master developers out there that are thinking long term.
Thank you. And that actually is a perfect segue into my next question for you. For our audience out there, which is primarily real estate agents throughout Florida, what are some specific home features that a buyer concerned about either sea level rise, flooding, climate change, or just energy efficiency in general, what can they look for?
Well, for sure, we're going to start with location, right? So location, location, location. I want to be at the beach. I absolutely love the beach. It's my meditational zone, but I don't want to be at the beach during hurricane season, for sure. So location is one thing, obviously. Durability, if it is an older home, then definitely considering the age of the home, because durability could be an issue. Now, can you retrofit an existing house to be durable? Absolutely. But things like hurricane straps, impact windows, making sure, again, that your wind load the house can handle is appropriate for the area. So again, it depends if you have someone saying, I absolutely want a new house, or someone that's in the market for a home that maybe isn't new. The age of the home is definitely something that's important, because it will tell you what code the house is built to. And as much as I would love to think that everyone out there is just building hurricane-proof houses, that's not the reality. So the construction industry, the reality is we build to code. We may do a couple of extra things to amenitize the house, but we're not necessarily intentionally building to a higher level. I love what Miami has done from a standpoint of requiring. So Miami Beach and Miami, the city of Miami, require green building certification. And we know that those certified projects are more durable and more efficient and healthier than traditionally built projects. So they could always look for a third-party certification. That could be a green building certification or a certification like Fortified. So I think Jen might be able to speak to Fortified from an insurance standpoint, but we do quite a few of those homes because we know that the nail spacing is tighter. The house in general has a third-party verification that it is more durable.
Thank you, Doctor. Senator, I'm going to put you back on and kind of go with the same question there. Dr. Languell specifically mentioned our codes down here. What would you like to add to that discussion?
Certainly locally, we've been a lot more receptive, and we consider ourselves, I think, to some extent separate from the rest of the state because, you know, in a nonpartisan fashion down here, we've been mindful. You know, condo owners, neighborhoods don't delineate between the politics, just the reality sometimes of the situation. So they see what's right in front of them and how their quality of life is, you know, how it can be so detrimental, you know, based on what we have in certain sections of my district of recurring flooding, where some homes actually like in the North Miami area are just suffering repetitive flooding situations, sort of in that basin area. So to the point of we've been trying to do what we can locally. Also, it's important to mention that some of our cities are able to successfully bond for projects. where there is enough political will. I mean, and I've said this before to a number of your attendees on these discussions, there hasn't been the political will really to talk about these tough love and sometimes expensive measures to take in a retroactive fashion, because they're not sexy to campaign on. Nobody wants to talk about poop. When they're trying to say how they're going to improve lives, they go to PTA meetings and Little League and they talk about how great things are and smart growth and how they're going to bring jobs, and they talk about different silos and things they don't even have purview over because they sound good in their catchphrases. But the reality is that while cosmetically we have some beautiful, condo and single family detached home product, our organs, have not been that great, so it's true Miami to a certain extent. We look pretty on the outside, but what you don't see and what's sort of subterranean has always been an issue, and our, resilience to a number of just, naturally occurring things, whether you believe it's man-made or like my brother likes to espouse, we're at the end of a mini ice age, and that's why things are raising. We are where we are. So I think you're going to segue probably into a discussion or questions about what the legislature is doing about that, right? Maybe.
Yes, we will be in just a moment, but I think
Okay.
we've got Ms. Kowalski back. So I wanted to get her involved and ask her a couple of these questions. So
Sure.
Jen, if you're available, can you turn on your camera?
You don't see my camera currently?
No.
Must have a really weak signal. So I've switched cameras. I could see myself, but that's
I
not
see her.
You
Can
see
you-
her? She's up there now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I don't see her at my end, so hopefully the audience does have the pleasure of seeing Jen rather than Senator Pizzo is still up there. So Ms. Kowalski, we were talking about all the different property values and all of the different things that we're coming across, but we want to talk about homeowners and flood insurance because particularly, I mean, in general, that's an important topic here in Florida, but in the advent of sea level rise and probably more powerful hurricanes, that is particularly important. So can we start off with, can you talk to us about the FEMA's Risk Rating 2.0, which is scheduled to go in effect on October 1st of this year, and then any other climate-related changes that you see?
Absolutely. And I want to echo some of the comments of the other panel members. The building code changes are a very big step for the insurance industry. So the newer the home, obviously it's up to the current code. Building code changes every 3 years, that those things are reviewed. And in fact, there was a more stringent code one in January 1st of 2021. So those changes are paramount to us trying to offset some of the wind and the water exposure. So for a lot of customers, those changes that they're required or builders are required to make, and some of the benefits that the customer gains are also taking into account as far as insurance rating. So the age of your home, the age of your roof, the age of some of those systems, that's absolutely determining your eligibility and therefore your price for the insurance product. Speaking of price, this upcoming change for the NFIP is going to be a big one. So historically, the NFIP has been lagging behind the insurance industry as a whole, both homeowners and flood. They have not had the sophistications in rating that a typical homeowner's policy has had. So simple tools such as determining the replacement cost, determining and rating by the type of material that the house is constructed of. These are some of the new changes that are coming out this year. And the more painful part of this change is while we're getting closer to actuarial soundness on the NFIP side, it is causing and creating new heartburn. So for some folks, if you're on a lower coverage side, if you have a smaller home, they have been paying a proportionately higher amount. So for those lower values of those dwellings, they've been paying a little too much. And for the folks that are in seasonal secondary residences and higher end homes, they've actually been not paying enough. So with this 2.0 change, there's currently in Florida, there's 1.7 million FEMA or NFIP flood policyholders. So of that group, a healthy 3/4 of those folks we'll be looking at a rate increase starting April of 2022. So the decreases, and about 25%, 20 to 25% of those customers will see a slight decrease. Those decreases will go in this October, and the increases will roll in starting in April. So it's basically the product of just increased technology. 10 years ago, you wouldn't be able to go online and go see what rising sea levels would look like at your particular house. You can do that today. And the sophistication of the environment is really kind of pushing this along. I would say just because the NFIP is such a big machine, it's taken them longer to adjust to some of those nuances that makes the rating more accurate. So the data is just better now. So my advice, I think, for any consumer that's affected by rate increases or even just wants to see what else is out there, there are an increasing number of private flood options. So NFIP is no longer the only game in town. Customers also have that option, and it's been proven eligible that if you have a company that is offering a private flood policy and it specifically states that it meets the definition of private flood insurance, it is going to be satisfactory to your mortgage company. So I encourage consumers, realtors, help your buyers look for other options. So there's just an increasing number of private flood options that help you get more coverage, which a lot of folks may need, or better coverage, or just more opportunities to price shop against the NFIP.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate it. Today is the first day of hurricane season for 2021, and I know NOAA is predicting quite an active one. From the perspective of insurance here in Florida, do you have any advice for our audience?
I do. I would continue to look at and be educated about the things that drive your insurance rates. So the most importantly, the newer the roof, the newer the systems, the newer the home, the better insurance pricing that you can achieve. I will give you a word of caution. So we have kind of a tough environment out there. So if you ask a roofer for a quote, they're going to try to sell you a new roof no matter what. So you have to be careful. There's some other elements at play right now. But I would just be aware of what drives the rate for homeowners insurance, and I would also be cautious about if offered something too good to be true out there, somebody knocks on your door. Just be really careful and make sure if you have any questions about that, talk first to your insurance agent, and just make sure that whatever someone is promising you, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. But generally speaking, I would be thinking about building code and just thinking about the newer homes. I've seen it firsthand. In fact, Hurricane Irma was a very big storm for us in 2017 here across Florida. And you can definitely see how those homes, the newer the homes, have been performing just with the visual eye. Any layperson can see that. So there's a lot of benefit with doing window replacements and some of those things.
Thank you. Dr. Languell, I'm going to ask you kind of the same question. I know that your industry is not insurance, but with the start of hurricane season and our discussion about sea level rise, do you have any advice for our audience?
So I would say, with respect to the 2.0 risk rating, I actually found one of their statements rather funny, and it said purchasing flood insurance is the first line of defense against flood damage. And I thought, well, that's not anywhere close to the first line of defense. The first line of defense would be not building in a flood zone, or it would be, of course, building to mitigate for a potential flood. But flood insurance isn't necessarily your first step. So I think that goes to show how sometimes we're not always thinking about solving the actual problem. Sometimes we're just reacting to the problem. So I think with respect to, how to go about handling all of this and the prediction that we're going to have an aggressive hurricane season, we know this is coming, and we do know how to build better, and we're just not making necessarily the best informed decisions. So we've learned more, we have experimented, we've seen what works, we've seen what failed. And I just think it's very difficult to push. I know Jen mentioned codes, I've mentioned codes. as we make codes more difficult, we price individuals out of the home buying market because we have to increase usually the cost to accommodate the additional things we're doing to the house. So there is a huge balance there between affordability and durability. And so we just have to, I think more wisely about what we're doing. And understand too, it's not, I agree with the senator with respect to, I don't care if you believe in climate change or not, right? So it's all about making informed decisions. And some of our issues are because of improper management of stormwater. And some of our issues are because, you know, we naturally have gravity effects as the moon goes into different phases. So it's not all one thing, but we do know that combined, we can absolutely solve or mitigate for these problems. I would absolutely encourage, if you're building a new home, definitely look into something called Fortified, because you do get insurance discounts if you build to those standards. So although some people may think a couple $1,000s extra is too much, it will pay itself back in a very short period of time. So we need to be looking at payback and help people understand return on investment when they're getting into homes, not just initial cost, I think.
Thank you. And I'm so glad you brought up the issue of affordability, and we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But I am going to turn to Senator Pizzo now very quickly. And basically, Jim Carroll for the Orlando Sentinel wrote, to tackle sea level rise and associated right now problem areas, we have to overhaul and update coastal Florida's flood control systems, raise the roads, build seawalls, protect drinking water supplies, and adequately replenish the beaches and dunes. The cost to do all of this will be, frankly, stupefying. Now, I know you mentioned coastal erosion and a couple of those other things. So what is the state of Florida doing or planning to do to mitigate those costs for the local and, you know, basically address all of these issues that we're talking about?
So the reporter's idea of stupefying, or that number to associate it and quantify that number, actually becomes rather de minimis when you contemplate what the actual assessed and market value of the real estate in Miami-Dade County is. So the property appraiser gave me an update as I was going into session. We're at $452 billion. That's $500 billion of market value in Miami-Dade County real estate. So when typically you hear something like, oh, it's $3.5 billion to convert septic to public sewer, and it's that in itself might be close to a $4 billion price tag to go ahead and rip up, repair, and replace necessary pump stations and lines. It's rather de minimis. And I think I've used this analogy with you guys before. It's, you know, if you have a $40,000 car, you'd spend, you know, $400 to fix it, right? It's 1%. If you had a $400,000 condo or home, you'd spend $4,000 to fix it. If you have $452 billion worth of market value, you know, what's your threshold on where you would go, not just to repair things, but to save them? And we're, you know, if you take out the priceless works of art, you know, we're more valuable than Venice, you know, and they haven't given up. They've been doing it for a long time, earlier than the founding of our country, with these concerns about sinking and displacement. So from a legislative level, again, like I said before, this is rather groundbreaking of the commitments that we've had. It started out about $100+ million in the beginning of session, and now we're at $500 million as it relates to resiliency alone, plus better mapping, $100 million for mapping services. I disagree a little bit with the source of funding or the percentage breakdown. Last year, as the panelists had mentioned, we had a record year actually for new declarations of domicile, 389,000 new Floridians, including my dad, who finally declared residency in Florida. And I, you know, he sort of, in a self-deprecating fashion, thinks that he's propping up the market because he didn't negotiate and paid full price, and things around him are going crazy. Settled in Jupiter, lovely area, a little bit of God's waiting room compared to Miami, but nice nonetheless. And you know, so I'm looking just sort of highlights from the legislative session. $500 million will go for Resilient Florida grants. It's basically going to be run through the DEP, who's science-minded, thank goodness. $500 million for wastewater treatment programs, and things like coastal mapping services, like I said, 100 million, Everglades restoration, beach management funding assistance of $50 million, some great new technology that's come out on sort of coagulating sand in an eco-friendly way. And we just have to be smarter. I'll give you, for instance, even though my kids love to frequent the Haulover Beach area, the sandbar there that collects, it's like a great gathering point. It's fun for them. It's fun for me too when I had time. But instead of going and grabbing sand from a much more northern location, which would be much more expensive, they're going to be taking sand locally and then using that for Bell Harbor and other areas, which makes sense and saves millions of dollars and is actually more efficient, both time and by cost. So as a first real coming out party, so to speak, for resiliency and climate change issues, it's a very big step. It's over $1 billion commitment. Again, it's de minimis. What would you spend? What should we be spending to protect the fair market value of these properties? So I think we're in a good path.
I like the way you relate it to the overall value of real estate here in Florida. So thank you for that. While I was doing some research for today's program, I came across the Florida Forever Land Acquisition Program. Can you tell us what that is, what it means to accomplish, and any impact you think it may have for mitigating damage from sea level rise and flooding?
So working backwards from that concept, U.S. cities, counties, other government entities, and states and federal government always have the power of eminent domain. And sometimes, it's used sparingly, thankfully, in my district, but it was just used recently, actually, in a section where the Ives Dairy Road is up in the Aventura area, displacing some businesses for transportation. However, we do dedicate and set aside millions of dollars every year, and there's been some adjustment inside one of these bills, actually. The first X number of dollars, I think they lowered the percentage from 26 to 20, so it's like 100 million of the first 466 million goes and is distributed to the acquisition of land. And now this has traditionally been to buy areas that would have been otherwise used for sugar. It has runoff, into Lake Okeechobee, and we've seen algal blooms and things of that nature. But in addition to the things I mentioned selfishly, there's a lot of money and resources going to other environmental issues and environmentally sensitive areas. That includes the Piney Point, which we all saw on TV, which looked like an Aaron Brockovich story all over again with certain disaster, and it was pretty close to disaster and is. But also, getting the legislature on board to do things even on the West Coast, in the Gulf for red tide. We need some help with sargassum here. But there's been traditionally millions and millions of dollars set aside for the acquisition of land, which obviously is helpful, even in a very informal sense on staging or access to certain things. If we just make impervious surface areas everywhere, obviously access is an issue, and trying to mitigate things is an issue. So that's that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ms. Kowalski, if I would kind of like to ask you, Senator Pizzo has just talked about state legislative programs. Is there anything coming out of the insurance industry that you would like to see the state of Florida enact?
Absolutely. In fact, we're in the toughest market without question in the country, and with the elements that we're facing with the sea level rise, that is something that's going to naturally be harder and harder for the industry. So, a question for the senator, I think if we were to ask for some help on some issues, I think the biggest issue for us is the man-made issues. So, we're doing our part to try to stay abreast of all that's changing. The data scientists, the climate modelers, they're taking a look at this and have some various degrees of expectation as far as what's going to happen down the road. The biggest challenge near term for us, from product offering and just availability for Floridians, are some of the man-made challenges. And I'm sure, some of those issues came up in the most recent Senate Bill 76. So if I had to make a request to help keep affordability in check, we know we're all fighting the sea level rise with rising home costs and, 40% average rate increases for the property insurance industry. My fear is, some of the byproduct of all this is the affordability of housing, because currently Floridians have two things working against them. It's insurance and new home pricing. So,
excellent points. Thank you. Dr. Languell, I'm going to ask you the same question. You've got Senator Pizzo right here. From the building industry perspective, what would you like to see Tallahassee do?
Well, I see three drivers when it comes to green building and sustainability. And I see one of them being regulation, requirements, codes. I'm telling you, you have to do it, therefore you will do it. The second one I see is money. And I don't mean money from a standpoint of greed by any stretch of the imagination. I mean it by either an investment partner or the funding possibly coming from the government. Those two things historically haven't been tied to doing green building or sustainable construction. And now we're seeing that a lot more. So if you get any federal funds or Florida Housing Finance Corp funds to build an affordable multifamily unit, you must certify that project green. We've had a couple instances where Prudential was a funding partner and they're now requiring green because they understand there's a value associated to that. The third driver I see is really that genuine corporate culture, someone who wants to do it and just is committed to it. I would love to say that's what I see all the time, but what I see mostly is I have to do it or my money for my project is tied to it. So I think we just need to take advantage of that. We need to push a little bit harder, especially in coastal areas, that they do build and certify to some of these higher standards, so to speak. And definitely keep our money tied to it, because if the project can't get funded unless they do something, sure enough, they will do it. I definitely agree from an affordability standpoint. I want to just make a shout out to DEO for all of the Irma rebuilds and Michael rebuilds. They are requiring those projects are all certified. So these homeowners are getting strong, efficient homes. So I know it's unfortunate that they're in a situation where they need a rebuild, but they are getting something that's a much better home for them for the rest of their lives.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Senator Pizzo, any comments on that before we move on?
Yeah, so it wasn't a very popular vote for me on my political side, siding actually with on SB 76 and voting yes on it. However, as the votes went, more of my side voted like 35-5. And really what it does is it recognizes a problem. I don't know how we got here. I don't know who's to blame. It's kind of analogous to climate change in a certain sense of, what's the root cause of it. However, we're seeing situations where payouts to policyholders was like anemically 8%, 9%, 71 cents on the dollar was going to attorneys, not actually getting to the policy. We also only have, I think, 8.5% of the entire insurance market, but we have like 70% of the litigation nationwide. That's not sustainable. So just let me say that again. We have like 11 times overweight what our litigation, should be. Now, should we have more litigation than Idaho because we have coastal issues and all kinds of? Yeah, but not so crazy high. And the problem is the way the system has ended up becoming. It's not actually getting the assistance to the policyholder, to the homeowner. It's creating a lot of costs up front. I'm not even crazy about some of the ways that the Sadowski Fund, which is the fund that overwhelmingly the electorate voted for in '92, it's a wonderful concept and idea, but sometimes it's front loaded with fees that are paid. They don't actually put bricks and sticks and shovels in the ground. And I think a lot of our cities, especially, have liked fast dimes over slow quarters and have taken money in lieu of things for impact fees. So we try to clean up and shore up that there's more of a direct nexus. We want to make sure that to the panelist point about efficient and actual dollars and people on all sides trying to get people to actually buy in, not because it's popular, not because it's a requirement, but because you want to. And when you don't have the political will in local municipalities and counties, and they're taking money in lieu of for certain things, that's dangerous. So, yeah, I agree with each and every point. On the code basis, sometimes it's obviously more expensive to be compliant with things that are more forward-looking. It's a tough love measure, and I think it's necessary. I think we need to not make shortcuts. The other issue is, and it goes back to being really unpopular, is a lot of this stuff is prohibitively expensive to the individual homeowner or the individual project, so to speak. So